So both King David and Mary hear of God's plan, and they hear of it in different ways. I'd like to tell you about another person, someone I just came up with. His name is Delightful David. So not King David, but a young 18-year-old who is discerning his future, curious to know what God has planned for him. Curious to know what his calling is. Is he called to be a priest or a religious in a community, or to be married, have a job, have a family? Everyone around David has always called him a delightful boy. He's always been curious about other people and what motivates them. The closer that he gets to graduation and being out on his own, the more curious he gets about God and what motivates him. He remembers experiencing a spark in his heart during a confirmation retreat several years prior, when he learned that it is love that motivates God. Every choice that God makes comes out of his love. And Delightful David remembers experiencing a spark in his heart, and that energized him. And now, midway through his senior year, the more he thinks about what motivates God, and he remembers, it's God's love that does that. He remembers that spark. And he's energized once again every time he thinks about that. But he doesn't know what to do with that energy. Part of him really wants to apply to a college and learn about early childhood development. Maybe he'll become a psychologist or an elementary school teacher. Because he likes to see what motivates kids. How can he motivate them to learn? There's another part of him that's intrigued by the elderly population and serving their growing needs. What motivates them to fight through the difficulties they fight through? Maybe he could work at a nursing home or an assisted living village. Delightful David was in line in the grocery store one day, and he noticed an elderly man in a hoodie, hood up and everything. And he was drawn to how this man moved. And the hood all of a sudden got David to think of a monk. He's never thought of the religious community as something that he could actually be part of. But all of a sudden, he sees himself as a monk, wearing these cool hoods, like this, chanting, walking down the halls with his elderly brothers. And so, he thought of being a monk at a monastery with an aging community specifically. Now, while this thought seemed to come out of left field, it was foreign to him, but he also noticed that he wasn't opposed to it. An odd but gentle peace came over him as it was his turn to check out in the grocery store line. He went home and he told his dad about it. And his dad got a little anxious. Delightful David is his only son. If he becomes a priest or a monk, who's going to carry on the family name? But he tried not to let his pride take over the conversation. He just listened to his son and quietly asked God to quickly give him some insight. What can I say? What can I say? What can I say? What can I say? And nothing came. So his dad didn't say anything. Just listened intently, asked more questions, and encouraged him to take it to prayer. But not only this left field image of an old man in a hoodie that could be him, his own son, as a monk in a monastery with an aging community, to also take to prayer this desire, this intrigue that he has with early childhood development, and perhaps being a teacher or a psychologist. And delightful David's dad ended the conversation by thanking him for bringing this to him and suggested that he would bring the idea of becoming a teacher to one of his favorite teachers, someone he trusted and could talk about that. So that's what delightful David did. He brought it to prayer, and he brought it to other people. And he just got their feedback. And in prayer, he first of all is reminded that when he asks about what motivates God, how does God make his decisions? He remembers that God is motivated by love. And he's energized. So he takes this energy into, okay, but now what should I do? How should I make my decisions? I want to be motivated by love too. Both of these things that are in my heart are loving. It's for love of other people. So God, which one are you calling me to? Notice how in our first reading, King David, not to be confused with delightful David. I'm sure sometimes King David was delightful, but other times he certainly was not. He was currently in our reading today at a moment of delightfulness because the whole land was finally at peace. Why was it finally at peace? Well, that means that prior to it, there was lots of battles going on. So King David was not so delightful during those battles. His people loved him because they were winning the battles. So that was a delight. But it's still ugly business. War. Defending your land. It's not delightful work. But now the battles are over. It said, when King David was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from his enemies on every side. King David was finally at rest. God wants to give us rest. He sees us through our battles and has the plan to finally give you rest, but not until the battle's over. That battle is metaphorical for absolutely everything. Actual battle, battle about your vocation, discerning your vocation in life, battle about whether or not you should take a certain job that's going to cause you to move to a whole other state. Don't do it, stay here. Battles over raising children, battles over raising your parents. All sorts of battles. Battles over whether you should go back to school. Not if you're currently in college. Yes, go back to school. No, I mean, you're out of school, but maybe finally get your doctorate. God gave David a time of peace. And in that peace, David realized, well, here I am in comfortable livings. And God, all this time, has been in a tent. Isn't it time for the God of the universe to be given a more magnificent home? And he tells Nathan, his friendly prophet buddy, who had to call, I laugh because remember, Nathan is the one who called him out against his sin against Bathsheba and Uriah. But he tells Nathan the prophet, here's my plan. And Nathan says, without consulting God first, God is with you. Do what has come to your mind to do. So in general, that's good advice. God is with you. Maybe he put that in your heart. Go do it. But notice how David and Nathan had to be open to God's real answer. Because eventually Nathan heard God's real answer. No, it is not for King David to make me a home. I have another plan. And they both had to be open to that. And what is this other plan from the Lord? The Lord also reveals to you that he will establish a house for you. And when your time comes and you rest with your ancestors, that means he dies, I will raise up your heir after you, sprung from your loins, and I will make his kingdom firm. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. Your house and your kingdom shall endure forever before me. Your throne shall stand firm forever. And so this is, at some level, foreseen in King Solomon. But King Solomon, he didn't stay faithful to God forever. And there was lots of issues that eventually happened with the kingdom near the end of his life and the following generations. And so Solomon doesn't completely fulfill this prophecy from God given through Nathan, the prophet. We fast forward then to our gospel. Listen to Gabriel's words now as he speaks to Mary. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name him Yeshua. God saves. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give him the throne of David his father. And he will rule over the house of Jacob forever. And of his kingdom there will be no end. Sound familiar? Jesus is the one who ultimately fulfills these prophecies. And imagine Mary, younger than my made-up character, Delightful David, is given an encounter with God through the archangel Gabriel. Now, Gabriel, this is nothing new to Gabriel to give important messages from God, but this is very new to Mary. To see an archangel, to hear his voice, to say, you are going to be the mother of the Son of the God Most High. But first, Gabriel says, hail, full of grace. He gives her a title. More than a title, an identity. He identifies her as the one who is filled with God's grace. And she's kind of taken aback by that. I would hope to say she was at peace with that. It came from God, that title. So why isn't she at peace? But she's not. Gabriel has to say, "Fear not," and continues to explain God's plan for her. And Mary asks a question. And it's very important to know how she asked the question, because there's two different ways of asking a question. There's the question where you're not really asking the question because you're immediately asking it in such a way that is already putting in the answer, which is, "What do you mean?" Meaning, don't even tell me. I don't want to know. But instead, Mary asks the second way of asking a question, which is, "How can this be? Tell me more. If this is coming from God, I want to get to know God and his plan for me." And that's what she does. And Gabriel answers more. And her heart must have been at peace at that moment, because she said, "Let it be done unto me according to God's will." And that's going to be key for my made-up character, Delightful David. To listen to where God's giving him peace. Whether it is to be a monk, which seemed to come out of left field. If God's going to give him peace when he imagines what life would be like in a monastery with an aging community. Or if he's at peace with a bunch of rugrats running around being a teacher. Some people are at peace with that. Some people get ulcers just thinking about it. That probably isn't their calling. The O antiphon for today is O Key of David, a title for Jesus himself, who is the key to unlock God's kingdom for all of us. That is all of our vocation, to be in God's kingdom here and now and forever in heaven. Jesus is the key. He's the one who opens up the kingdom to all of us. In all things, we must turn to him. So what sort of questions do you have for this week? Are you still struggling to plan for Christmas? What is Christmas going to look like during a COVID pandemic? Did you learn from Thanksgiving? Or is something still going to look different? Have you asked the Lord? What is his plan for you and your family this Christmas? Maybe it's going to be more simple. And maybe that's going to be the great grace. Finally, a simple Christmas. Kind of like back in 2006 when we had the snowstorm on Christmas and no one could go anywhere? I remember my sister going, "This was so great. We weren't rushing to go from place to place. It's just Christmas with the kids." Ask the Lord, what does he have in plan for your family this Christmas? And then, like Mary, have the peace and the confidence to know that God is motivated by love. And so what he wants is the best for us. Lord, let it be done to me and my family according to your will.